The drummer is arguably the most important musician in a worship band. They can make or break the feel and dynamic changes of a song. This video is for worship leaders who want to see their drummers flourish as musicians. I interviewed Jon Manna with worshipdrummer.com, and he shares 6 ways that you can help develop a worship drummer. This video is brought to you by Lead Worship with Ableton, a free training to help you get started with the #1 worship leading software. With Ableton Live, you can run a click, backing tracks, and automate lyrics and lighting. It's the best tool for increasing excellence and eliminating distracting mistakes in worship. Click the link in the description to enroll in the free training today. My name is Jake Goslin with churchfront.com, an online resource for innovative and creative church leaders. Subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you can receive all of our latest content to help you grow yourself and grow your church. Check out the show notes below for links to free resources for your worship ministry. Did you know that I have a podcast? Click the link in the description of this video to listen to this long-form interview on the go. I've also included quick navigation links for this video below in the description. So without further ado, here's my interview with Jon Manna of worshipdrummer.com. Jon Manna, welcome to the Churchfront podcast.
Thank you, man. My pleasure.
Hey, before we get into sort of the good stuff and the meat of this session, as we're going to talk through ways to develop our worship drummers, first just introduce yourself to us, the Churchfront community, so we get to know you and we can also get to know a little bit more about what you're up to at worshipdrummer.com.
Sweet. Well, my name is Jon Manna. I'm originally from Montreal, Quebec, and I'm not French. I'm Italian, just to put it out there, but I do speak both of those languages as well. So forgive me if my English is not perfect, but I'll do my best. But yeah, I started drumming mainly in high school. Let me just back up even before that. My mom was our church secretary, and on my days off from school, there would be no one to really watch me. So she would have to bring me to church. I would get bored, wander off into the church sanctuary, and would usually end up smashing the drums, and then the senior pastor would come in, and I knew that that's when I had to, I crossed the line. So that was when I was 10 years old. Then in high school, I started playing percussion, and so I learned how to read a bit of music, played xylophone, timpani, snare, and then didn't really learn the drum set formally. But I was just, every lunch hour, I'd go in our drum room and just play in high school. And then started playing in church around the same time. And funny thing is, it wasn't youth group, it was Sunday service, which was all an accident because no drummer showed up. And my sister was the backup singer, and they're like, "What are we going to do?" She's like, "My brother can play." And I had my sticks already in my hand. Don't ask me why, but I was that guy. So I played my first service on a Sunday, big traditional congregation, hymns, pa 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 pa, and the bass player was coaching me verbally through the whole set. But needless to say, that's kind of how I got my beginnings. Off in Bible school, I sensed the call of God, so I went there. And didn't really know if it wasn't pastoral or music. Other people were like, "I'm called to be a youth pastor." I was just I just love Jesus and music and felt like I'm supposed to be here. So I took music as my kind of focus. I graduated from North Point Bible College in New England in 2005 with a minor in music and a major in biblical studies. And then started off in youth ministry. And that was back in Montreal. Moved here to Toronto, where I live now, in 2008. And was married in 2009. And so all this is leading up to this for Worship Drummer. It was, I believe, November 2010. I woke up with a dream. It wasn't really a dream. It was more of a phrase in my head. And it was simply this: Worship Drummer. And I was like, what is this, God? But I did feel like God put it there. And at the same time, I had just started blogging and, my own hosted WordPress blog and that kind of thing. And I said, okay, so I guess I'll just do what I'm learning with, blogging and stuff. And so I bought worshipdrummer.ca because .com was taken. The guy wanted $500 and I was like, no way. My wife actually was the one who's like, you're not doing that. And then basically with worshipdrummer.ca, I just started writing, and it was a blog. And since then, it's evolved like crazy. We just celebrated 7 years this past March. And so it actually launched March of 2011. So it took me about like 4 months to kind of set up everything and then finally launch in 2011. To date, we've partnered with, the drummers from Hillsong, Bethel, Planet Shakers. I just released a video from their conference from April. And in like 5-6 days, it has over 29,000 views already. So that's just kind of the stuff that's been going on. So I'm a lead pastor today here in Toronto. Never thought I'd be doing this. But Worship Drummer all along, if you want to call it my side hustle, I just call it my passion. It's not really a business endeavor of mine. It's more of like, I feel God said, do this, and just to be a resource. So Worship Drummer in its essence, and I'll stop with this because I'll just talk forever if you want. But Worship Drummer is a digital resource that equips, encourages, and inspires local church drummers globally.
I love it. That's a really important resource. Like, that's kind of the cool thing about the internet is you can focus on one little niche or interest, and like worship drumming, right? Like, who would have thought, as far as like, you have an Instagram account with who 53,000 people are like, I want to follow this because probably they're a worship drummer themselves or a worship leader, or, they're just also interested in that too. And it is fun to see really the community that you've been building around this particular niche. It's like a niche within the niche, right? If worship music in general is a niche. And then like underneath that, now it's like drumming. And I mean, I just want to back up and say, like, I think this is just such an important resource for church musicians all around. Just because worship drums, it's important. Like, of all of the instrumentalists in my band, this is my own personal opinion. Like, the drummer is my basically my most important instrument. And no offense to guitarists, pianists, bassists, or whatever, but like, to me, drummers have such a huge impact on the overall feel of a song and just other, obviously, tempo and drive and dynamics. It's like, without a solid drummer, it's like that's like my worst fear. And like, fortunately, right now at my church plant, I have a solid drummer who serves most weeks, and then I have some other guys who I can call in on, on a regular basis when I need it. But I think the reason why, like, this is Worship Drummer, part of the success of why it's taken off so much and the platform you built is like, this is just a really legit need within the worship music space. And people need equipping and developing in this area because, someone may be a good drummer, be able to keep time, know all the technicalities and methods of, how to play this or that beat, but there is a particular style that needs to be kind of learned, and you have to know, like, again, you have to approach it with the right heart. There's like all these other different things going on, right? As a worship musician in general, but especially for a drummer. So I don't know. I'm just like, I'm excited for what you built, and it keeps growing. Keep up the great work. And
thanks, man.
What I wanted to have you talk to the church front community about, because most of us, are worship leaders, and probably a few worship drummers listening too, but maybe speaking specifically to worship leaders, like, how do we go about developing out our drummers? Because maybe there's someone who we identify who maybe like you back in the day, right? When you were young and you just started off, like, if someone has potential, they can keep a good, steady beat. They know how to keep time well. but there's like lots of room for growth. Like, what advice do you have for a worship leader like me to continue to develop out that person's skills?
Yeah, that's cool. Happy to talk about that. Just before we jump in, I do want to make one comment that when I was learning, I don't remember, like early 90s, let's say. I'm 36, so I feel super old now that I think like that. I think it was a lot less complex, if you know what I mean. Like I click, metronome, multi-tracks, all of that stuff didn't really exist. It was just the bass player shouting to me, chorus, that first Sunday. However, so it's slightly more complex today, but there are way more advantages to train and to learn as a drummer, especially with the advent of the internet, right? So that's what we're going to jump into. So in terms of some tips for developing worship drummers, I think one of them would be to learn how to communicate with them. I have a wide array of experience playing in different things, traveling throughout Bible school and being at many different churches in that process, and working in a lot of churches now. But I've been in some settings where the worship leader just knew how to sing and could not relate to, let's just say, the drummer in this case. And so learning some drum lingo would be helpful in the very basic sense of that. So some of the things, some drum lingo, let me just drop some words like 4 on the floor. If you want that steady pulsing beat, which is popular now in modern worship, but instead of just saying, with your foot, just like, and I know not all worship leaders are at that basic level of, they don't know how to communicate. But so 4 on the floor is one of those words, driving. If you want to drive the song as a drummer, to me, that means I should be playing almost with anticipation, almost like in front of the beat, as opposed to a relaxed feel where I might be behind the beat a bit, just kind of everyone wants to kind of push, but I keep pulling back a bit. So I would say that's the difference. If you say driving, I'm going to think, okay, I'm going to push this a little more. If you say a little more relaxed, I'm going to pull the band back a little more. Or delicate, this part is more delicate, because for me, in my mind, that says, okay, you're not playing hard. Maybe you're just adding some color with your cymbals. If you have a shaker or something, a little more washy perhaps. And washy usually means, if you say, hey, play a little more washy, it's like cymbal swells, for this part, maybe before we build, let's just make it a bit more washy and open. And then, of course, full. If you say play full, well, then I'm like locking right in on the pocket, nice and loud, playing right at the top of my level, so to speak.
I love this lingo that you have too. It's like because usually I default to it's big here or it's soft here, right? Like I'll use like 2 words like that, which are kind of very generic words, and it's like, but where I never thought, the reason we have language is we can like have more specific words that kind of better describe what we're going for. So I love like driving versus delicate versus, instead of saying like, just big versus soft, right? And because like sometimes you say those things and they might think big means as loud as possible, when really no, you just want that driving feel. The same thing with delicate. Instead of like, making it way too quiet, playing way too soft, like, words matter, and I think that's really true in this case of how we communicate with drummers. So, dude, I'm picking up a lot of valuable stuff right now.
And the reason I say learn the drum lingo, and notice none of them say like use brushes or use drumsticks, right? You should have this trust, and I think we'll get to that in a later point, perhaps, but you should be able to use a descriptive word, and as a drummer, I need to be able to interpret how to achieve the delicate sound, because I can still play very lightly with wood sticks, right? But and that used to bother me when they're like, "Ooh, this is a loud room," and the sound tech would say, it's a loud room. Maybe you want to try brushes for sound check. I'm like, don't suggest. I mean, maybe you know the room better than us. We were traveling at the time, but I was like, let me determine. I'll work with you to get where we need to be, but I'll experiment with the right sound in terms of sticks or brushes or hot rods or whatever. One more thing on this one. Steve Gould, who's a drummer out of Phoenix, he plays for, he's actually on staff at CCV, Christ's Church of the Valley. It's a huge church. And he also played with like Sarah Bareilles and all these other amazing artists. But I heard him once say, as a worship leader, consider even taking a one-on-one drum lesson. Like you actually go in the room, not like an online lesson or anything, but where you can start to actually understand the nuances, and how it actually feels to be a drummer. So that would be something interesting. That would definitely help you learn how to communicate. Although I'm not sure how many worship leaders would actually do that.
But I think if the ones who are serious, like they would.
Yeah.
I mean that's something where it's like it's a really simple idea. If you went to just shop around online and find someone who could give you, I don't know, like decent lessons are probably $30 a half hour or something like that. Like, see if you can get $120 together from your budget and go take four or five sessions, and tell them what you're trying to learn. Like you want to learn the technique so you know how to communicate better. I think that's a really brilliant idea. And it kind of like, it's just another thing I like to emphasize for worship leaders is the importance of being the MD, the music director or the band director of the band is like he requires knowing how to communicate with the band. It doesn't, awesome. You have to be competent as a singer and stuff like that if you're going to be a worship leader, like in playing your own instrument. But then I feel like 80% of worship leading is like leading the other people, whether your congregation or your band members themselves, and not just your own self. So yeah,
that's good. Another thing that comes to mind is to give them access to, and I say accurate worship drum tutorials. The reason I say accurate is because you can Google and find a lot of drum covers, and some of them are really good, and there are a lot of great drummers on YouTube and Instagram that you could find. But there are two guys I know personally as drummers that work with worshipartistry.com is Josh Ward. He's a guy I interviewed on my podcast. And then worshiponline.com. And they just last year launched their drum tutorial section. And Austin Davis, who plays at The Belonging with Carrie Job and a few other artists, plays drums there. And I have access to both of those. And I've watched through them and I'm like, they are on point. So if you want accurate, so we're talking about developing your worship drummers, right? I'd say just let them go do that. And I want to differentiate for a second. I'm not just talking about, buy them drum lessons. Like Drumeo.com does online drum lessons. Like I personally believe as a musician, I need to do my own work to prepare my skill set and what I offer to the Lord and to the team. So I'm not saying buy them drum lessons or send your drummer to drum lessons. No, if they're interested in playing, they should be passionate enough to want to learn themselves. But in terms of learning like specific worship stuff and, this is how they build in that song. And I'm sure churches, like there's a decent rotation of new stuff that we have to always learn. So I just think those two websites are accurate. And they allow you to see exactly how to play those songs.
Yeah, I agree. I have a Worship Online account, and I just am blown away by the quality of videos that Shaylin and his team are making. I had a podcast episode with him a couple months ago, and the whole point of Worship Online is kind of to be a virtual music director for your worship band, and that's what it is. And like having the best of the best drummers, like Austin or Josh, like with worship artistry, like it's awesome. And it's like, what better way for people to learn? And I think that's what I think it's another kind of thing that we forget about is like sometimes to learn a skill really well, you just gotta look at like the people who are really, really good at what that skill is and like and are doing it, and just copy them. Not for the sake of like you have to be a copycat of them, but like you think of, I think it was like, I don't know, what the old school composers like Beethoven would go and like just copy down Mozart's scores or something like that, and then look at what Beethoven did, or people who want to be authors will literally just sit down and copy other people's books just to get used to that style of things. Yeah. I think so. I love those sites that have just those super high quality tutorials, and I think there's good stuff on YouTube, but you have to be way more discerning.
Yeah, I agree. But you can find some good stuff. The third thing is, and I have to kind of break this one down because it might not make sense at first, but build your drummer's confidence as you entrust them with co-leading. And the way I would define co-leading, obviously they're not at the front with you if you're a worship leader, but it's more the idea of a quarterback. And you kind of referenced it in the beginning, like the backbone of the band. But a quarterback can make or break a play or a game, right? One wrong call, one wrong throw, and the whole thing falls apart. A drummer in the same way. By the way, I'm not a football player or fan at all, so if I messed up the analogy, just move on from that, all right?
Because you guys only watch like curling up there or something, right?
Yeah, or basketball, go Raptors, we the North. Yeah. But a drummer in the same way can make or break a song. And what I mean by that, here's an example. So your drummer is like, the bridge, and there's that epic build that's coming as we go back to the chorus. And for some reason, they think that it's supposed to die out instead, and they just kind of fail through that build. And then the rest of the band is up here, and your backbone has sunk, and everything falls apart. Or the opposite, right? The song, maybe it's a spontaneous moment, and it's supposed to come down, and your drummer just thinks, well, I'm going to start building, or feels something. So that's what I'm saying. They're co-leading, and usually the band does follow the drummer naturally. So if the drummer starts building, I think, I thought we were ending, so okay, let's build, and we're going to sing this again. And as a worship leader, I've been there myself. I've led worship for several years before being lead pastor at this church particularly. And I remember a few of those moments. So what I mean by build their confidence as you entrust them with co-leading is have a conversation with them. Knowing that they're the backbone of your band, bring them into that conversation so they understand the weight of that responsibility. And so at the same time, they're co-leading perhaps in terms of what your band is doing, but they're still not the ones calling the shots. Again, back to the football analogy, I'm pretty sure the quarterback, some shots he'll call on the field as an audible or whatever, but I'm sure he gets his instruction from the sideline most of the time. So the worship leader or the MD would be giving those instructions to me as a drummer, but then I'm the one who's going to execute that call for the rest of the band. So I'll build, and then the band's going to be like, oh yeah, here we go. And so that's what I mean by co-leading. And you have to have and develop that relationship. I don't want to say trust, but you're entrusting that responsibility to them, and you have to trust them with that responsibility. So that's a big one for me that I'm still processing and chewing on, because the drummer is so crucial. Oftentimes they're the one who will count the band in, start or stop your click or your multi. So they really need to be a person that you can depend on. So I'd say yes, and it's not to show favoritism versus your other musicians, but I just think if you communicate that expectation and say, hey, this, it's more than just playing your part. You're actually affecting what happens on the stage and what translates to a room full of people who are trying to be preoccupied with God's presence, not our mistakes or our band. Just communicate that expectation and foster that relationship as you co-lead with your drummer.
Yeah, I love the language of them being a co-leader, and you're right. I think that puts better words to what I was describing earlier. Has like, to me, the drummer is the maybe the whole band are technically co-leaders with the worship leader, but probably the drummer is the most influential co-leader. And yeah, I think some of the best worship drummers I know think like worship leaders. Like, even if they're not, vocalists or singers, they just know, like, they can they're reading the room. They're just, feeling, whether or not it's good to, build this up or repeat this again or whatever. And then, like, the rest of the band will follow. Like, I love it sometimes where even as a worship leader, like, I can sometimes, like, if the worship drummer is really reading the room well, and like, he's the one timing out, okay, how many times are we going to keep building this? And then when are we going to finally, like, start driving back into the full beat? Like, I love it because then I can focus on, like, worship in the congregation, and, like, the drummer is just kind of, like you said, co-leading there. So, it's good stuff. Love it.
If I just want to add one more part to that, just to reference an episode of my podcast, I was talking with Josh Fisher, who drums for Jesus Culture, and he was telling about the time when he first played with Chris. And Chris was a drummer at Bethel first, right? So he just, I'm not going to explain the whole conversation, but if anyone wants to find that episode and listen back to it, where he talks about his relationship with Chris when Chris now was leading and he was drumming for him. So I thought that was a cool connection to make.
Yeah, that's awesome.
All right, so another thing would be to expose your drummers to better drummers or musicians. And I've always been the kind of drummer or musician to, like, it's fun to play with your friends and your team, but I always felt like a new sense of this is adventurous and exciting when I felt out of my element. And I remember this one time we grew up attending our youth convention, and I was like, oh man, this is my dream. I want to play at youth convention one day. And I remember the year where I was called to do it. I was so nervous because I always looked up to these guys. And this year I was their backbone. I was sitting in that seat that I was like, oh my goodness. And yeah, you'll feel uncomfortable, but playing with better musicians just takes you much faster, I'd say, to a whole new level. Now, if you don't have any in your church, musicians that are above you, so to speak, in their musicality or their ability, I'd say the next best thing, or the easiest, quickest thing would be to check out Instagram or YouTube. And, I'm not here to toot my own horn, but on our Instagram channel, you can, it's more of to find the community, and then you could branch out from there. But you'll find a lot of drummers that I'll repost rather. And then on YouTube, I gather videos from the community. And so there are drummers out there. I just got a video from an Easter service, a guy in California who plays at Free Chapel there, played Easter service in an arena with Matt Redman. So he sent me a video of one of their songs, and then so I'll post that on our channel. So you might not be able to play with them, but you can definitely watch what they're doing. And what I try to do on my YouTube channel is get the in-ear mix as well. So you can hear the MD speaking, you can hear the click. So you get like a behind the scenes look at, okay, so this is actually what it means to play. And so you're exposed to better musicians. I'll probably never play at a church like Hillsong or Free Chapel or Elevation, but once you see some of those videos and you hear what they hear, it's pretty like, oh, so this is what's going on when you're playing at that level of musicianship. So that's one thing. Some other tips to expose your drummers to better musicians. You can attend a worship concert like the Outcry tour or any of the Bethel who, come around city to city. You could go to any concert for that matter. And I remember one of the first secular, I grew up pretty sheltered. I have no shame in admitting that, but I was a huge fan of Dave Matthews Band. And so right before I started Bible school, I went to my first Dave Matthews Band concert. It was amazing, but I think I got high just from smelling all the weed in the arena.
That's
I don't
like
know if I was
here in Colorado, any public event now.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. But that, or another idea is drum clinics at your local music store. If that's a thing where you live, find out, And but drum clinics are a really good option as well.
Yeah, love it. Yeah, so, you become like the average of the most 5 people you hang out most with, right? So I mean, same thing with musicianship. It's like, you're going to get better. You got to keep putting yourself in these situations with people who are going to push you to grow.
Yeah. Yeah. Another thing I want to share is to just simply resource your drummers. I know it sounds very basic. Maybe it sounds similar to one of the other ones I've shared. There are plenty of good online websites that offer free resources. I'll say it again. You have to be selective though, because I mean, there, as much as there is good advice, there are some guys who have no idea what they're saying. And they're like, this is a good cymbal. And they bought it at Walmart, which I saw a video of a guy buying a cymbal at Walmart and doing a review on it. But anyways, maybe it was like the cheapest cymbal you could buy. But so that's the reason for me why I built the worship drummer. So it started as a blog. I call it a digital resource now. And one of the things that I knew with Instagram, we inspire our community well. With the Worship Drummer podcast, it's a great way to encourage drummers. But last year, I had this, not even a crisis or dilemma. It was just, I got to the point where I'm like, so we do that really well, but how am I equipping drummers? What am I doing to equip, if that's one of the 3 core things that I say we exist to do? So I developed worshipdrummer.pro as a resource. What I did is I developed an online course to teach I basically said, what do I want to learn today as a worship drummer? And one of the biggest, there are a ton of videos out there, but one of the biggest mysteries is how, you see guys with the Roland SPDSX, they're triggering stuff. You see a drummer with a laptop running Ableton, and it's one thing to just say, okay, so that's Ableton and that's a drum pad, but what are they actually doing? And so I had a bunch of conversations about that with all the drummers I've talked to and interviewed and stuff. And I put it out on Instagram. I'm like, hey, these 2 things, Ableton and the SPDSX, what questions do you have around them? And I got over 50 DMs on Instagram come in. I wrote every single one of them out. And then I began to develop our online course. And it basically covers these 4 things: how to use the SPDSX as a MIDI controller in Ableton, how to use drum triggers and external control pedals with the Roland SPDSX, how to create and edit drum samples in Ableton Live to use then with your SPDSX. And then the last part of the course is we take all of these concepts and lessons and bring it into an actual live application where I wasn't the instructor for the online course. I got my friend Dan Perna to do that, who's local here. But then he shows in a live take how he's doing everything that we just taught. And then we stop that video, it replays, and then he does his voiceover explaining step by step by step. When I click this is what I'm doing. So basically, if we want to just dumb it down, I said, I don't know anything about these 2 things, and I want to develop a course so I can understand it.
Yeah.
And it's been really cool just to see drummers kind of get it.
Yeah.
when we sell the online course, what I also did, so that whole worshipdrummer.pro, that platform I built is solely to equip. So yes, there's a cost for the online course, but at the same time, we filmed 4 videos on how to use just the Roland SPDSX in worship. So those 4 are free. They're on our YouTube channel, and you'll get a good feel for the pad itself. And then the paid course teaches you how to use that with Ableton.
How would you describe the just kind of the transformation that this particular setup can bring to a worship band? If you're describing it to a worship leader, like someone who's not like, to me, like I'm not. I'm kind of like, I'm a relatively tech savvy worship leader, and I've seen I've seen drummers, especially professional ones, using the pad, and they have their laptop. And are they, it's like, I know Ableton, I use Ableton all the time to run tracks and stuff like that. That's what I just released a whole online course for that. And that's what's cool about Ableton is like, it's such a powerful software. Like I teach an online course and I don't even know like half of what Ableton does. So, but thinking of like the pads and Ableton setup, the triggering pads and Ableton setup, I guess what are drummers specifically using that for? Like, what sound is that producing? What's a good example of that?
Yeah, so I mean, every church does it differently, to be honest. Elevation is a whole other ball game at this point. They have their own guy in the back just tearing it up, and they have like multiple computers running Ableton as a backup and as a spontaneous, all this other stuff. Excuse me. But the cool thing, so in a simple application, you could, let's say using your top 3 pads, you can do start, stop. I guess you would need force. You can do start, stop. No, that's the same one. Start, stop. You can do up and down for your different tracks. Okay. So your drummer from his top row, they're like these little nubs at the top. They're not the actual full square pads. So you can enable that through that, and then use the rest of your options to load sounds or samples. Okay. Those samples can live on your pad, or they can be triggered from Ableton. Okay, which is crazy.
Yeah. So for example, in my setting at our church, we use Ableton Live right now to run our click tracks, and to automate stuff. And I build and run everything in arrangement view. And I know a lot of like sample triggering usually is in session view, because that's what session view is built for. Just more like, triggering sounds and stuff like that. But for our setting, what would be ideal? Would I want to set it up so that, my drummer could I can map the pads on the controller to different maybe song sections or something like that. If he wanted to jump to different places, obviously transport controls like play, stop, etc. Yeah. But then what about triggering sounds? Would it be more ideal to load them into the Roland, or to try to set up a way to trigger them, in session view? That's where I'd be a little bit unclear. And I need to take the course myself to learn about the specifics of what this would look like. Yeah.
I don't feel comfortable answering that.
Yeah.
The reason why I say that is because I'm not the be all, end all, know all, which is why I outsourced it to my friend Dan. But in the course, I actually didn't finish all of the material, learning it myself. So I don't have a direct answer. And I know that's not helpful for worship leaders listening. It's in the course. Mm-hmm. And what we also did is we have a Facebook group, a private Facebook group for that, where we can answer. And my friend Dan, who is the instructor, is on that Facebook group as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, I get questions even about Ableton, the way I use it, and I'm like, let me go research that, because I'm sure you can pretty much anything you can think of, you can accomplish in Ableton. It just, you have to learn how to use it. It's such a powerful tool, but at the same time, it's like I think people need a clear guide on how to use the darn thing, because that's just kind of the downside of it being so flexible. So there's a lot of ways to use it.
Absolutely. And so I'll say one more thing about we're talking about resourcing them, right? What I found is you could Google a whole bunch of stuff on how to use the SPDSX, how to use Ableton for samples or for your drumming stuff, but everything is so all over the place. So what we tried to do with the course is amalgamate and bring together all the helpful stuff for worship drumming. And that's, again, the focus. I keep it simple. This is what we are. This is who we are. You don't have to scour YouTube and watch a 20-minute video and be like, well, it didn't really answer my question yet. So that was the thing. What I also did for anyone who buys the course is I have a bunch of video footage that I've captured, like multicam with GoPro set up and all that. When like Bethel, Joe Volk was here, Elevation came through with Pastor Stephen Furtick. So I connected with their drummer that night, set up GoPros, and usually I try to get front of house audio with my own mix so that the drums are hot in the mix. So I put all those videos there. I have also a 30-minute interview with the drummers from the Outcry tour, which is, so that's all in there as exclusive bonus stuff for whoever buys that course. Again, it's to equip. So I'm just trying to put as much value in there. And I don't know when this episode will go live for you, but we can do like a $30 off coupon for your listeners if we want.
Awesome.
And I'm happy to do that. Maybe we'll just say the promo code will be Churchfront30.
Yeah.
And
sounds good. There you have it, folks. Churchfront30. And then I'll put the link in the description of the podcast for them.
Yeah, and we sell it for $97. So for $67, whoever wants it can grab it. And with that, you'll get access to everything that I just said, plus the Facebook group. So it's pretty cool.
Hey, I appreciate, on behalf of the worship leaders listening to this, I appreciate that.
Yeah, man.
And because I think it's going to be cool for them to be able to discover ways, especially if they're using Ableton, for running their click and tracks, which I'm an evangelist for because of, it's what I do every Sunday. They're going to be able to trigger Ableton, and then it sounds like also just knowing how to load sounds in there, being able to really just, I feel like it brings them to a whole different level of the different beats and types of sounding beats that they can produce, their worship drummer can produce. So that's really exciting.
So, and I'll just credit that to the fact that I couldn't answer your question myself. So take $30 off. You can go find the answer. It's there.
Sounds great. Cool.
Last thing that I want to share on this topic of developing your worship drummer is, and maybe this is like that's a no-brainer, why didn't I think of that, is maybe just to host a drum workshop. And it's not something worship drummer does on the regular, but I have been asked a few times to do it. I've done it locally here. What they do is they just grab all their drummers in their church. This one church I did it for had, I think, between like their youth, like up and coming young guys, youth band, and Sunday, there were about 10 to 12 musicians. And we took a Saturday morning 3-hour block from 9 to 12. And I wasn't just teaching, but it was practical. We were walking through some stuff that they were having challenges with. It's funny. I think the two main things, let's remove technology aside from the worship, dynamics and builds, believe it or not, are often those things that are like, how do I build for 8 bars in a song? So, excuse me, I worked through that with them. And I also, what was cool is I brought some like prototype cymbals from Heartbeat at that specific one, which is something that I don't always get to do, but it was fun. And they're like, oh, I've never seen cymbals like this. This is so cool to check out. So another thing, let's just say that's not, or you're like, but I only have 2 or 3 drummers. Like that's going to be, overkill for us. Then why not partner with other churches in your community or your city? And, as worship leaders, you might already be connected, but say, hey, how about we do this thing for our drummers? And I'm sure if you add up the sum total, you'd get a decent group. And at that point, if you just invest a bit of budget each, you can actually bring in a guest musician. Garrett Goodwin comes to mind. He plays for Carrie Underwood, but he grew up in the Brownsville Revival. I interviewed him on our podcast. He's in Nashville. He attends Lyndell Cooley's church there. And he does some of that stuff. Worship drummer, I've done a bit of that stuff as well. And maybe there's a few more opportunities in the future that I'm already aware of for us, but I can't spill those beans yet. But there's some exciting stuff coming. But yeah, partner with churches in your city, and maybe collectively you could do something that you couldn't do maybe as a single church alone.
Yeah, great idea. And that just requires worship leaders. Listen, if you're listening to this, go make friends with other worship leaders, network, come up with ideas. You're all in it together. And you're right. It's like it would be unrealistic for a small church to afford flying in some professional drummer to consult. But if like you guys get together and pooled your resources, some cool stuff could happen.
And another option on that note, if all else fails, use Skype.
Yeah. Totally.
Like I've seen, I think my memory is weird. I remember like stuff from a long time ago. I think it was Bethel in Reading. They had Paul Baloche Skyping in on one of their workshops or something like that. So be creative. If you don't have the time or the resource to fly someone in, maybe just do it over Skype. Yeah.
Well, Jon, thanks so much. Like these 6 tips they're helpful for me, giving me a lot of ideas. I've even thought a lot about my drummers, but I mean, this just gave me a lot more practical, actionable stuff that I can keep applying.
Awesome, man.
To help develop my drummer. So I appreciate it. I know the church front community appreciates it. So let us know where's the best place to follow you at Worship Drummer. I know obviously worshipdrummer.com is your website. But yeah, in case if people want to just keep an eye on what you're up to, and like you said, there's cool opportunities coming up that they want to make sure they hear about.
Yeah, I think the number one way is through Instagram at Worship Drummer. Okay. And aside from that, I really would encourage you to check out our YouTube channel. I mean, there's a lot of video that comes through. There's a backlog of stuff I still haven't posted, but it's always cool. I use the word exclusive sometimes, but it's just that you probably won't see those videos anywhere else. But so I'd say Instagram if you want to like follow along, get updates. I usually post there the most, and then our YouTube channel is where I'm going to be focusing heavily on moving forward.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks so much for all you're doing to help equip worship ministries around the world, and keep up the great work, Jon.
And thanks for all you do too.
Thanks. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Jon Manna. Check out his Master Modern Worship Drumming online course linked in the description. And don't forget to use the discount code he so generously offered the Churchfront community for a limited time. Thanks for watching. If you want to learn the #1 worship leading software, make sure you enroll in my free training, Lead Worship with Ableton, linked below. If you found this video helpful, hit the thumbs up button, share it with your friends, and you can check out some other cool videos right over here. Don't forget to subscribe to the Churchfront channel so you can receive all of our latest content to help you grow yourself and grow your church.